Am I heartless? Is the question so often echoing in Denji's mind. A persistent doubt, unwilling to leave his thoughts and only gaining strength the more sensations he discovers, thanks to the experiences he has the fortune and, just as many times, misfortune to live. There is a certain boundary between normality and a superior level of normality to which humans aspire, also known as dreams. Denji used to live several floors below normality and wasn't even allowed to dream the seconds he would lie down and eat his slice of bread under the unstoppable rain targeting his shed. But despite all the hardships, he could still call himself happy thanks to Pochita, who shared this misadventure of a life with him, killing the pain through lots of hugs and giving Denji courage. Courage comes from the Latin word cor, which means heart. And it's no coincidence that Pochita ends up becoming Denji's under the condition to show him his dreams. Question is, what is a real dream? And is a dog, if not a devil, even able to dream? In Chainsaw Man, Tatsuki Fujimoto tells the story about the discovery of one's humanity and freedom, with subtle amusement by deceiving the reader and keeping them busy with the fleshly and profane desires of a teenager shrouded in ignorance, while narrating under the surface completely different themes and messages, making Chainsaw Man an outlier, an anomaly in the landscape of modern manga industry, pushing the boundaries of artistic expression, from the bloody imagery to the casual dialogue, to the illusory structure of the story and the animalistic nature of its main character. Both of us like works that take the audience to a place they've never seen before, even ones where the genre changes halfway through the work. A fairly large part of the criteria when we evaluate a work is occupied by whether it has a feeling different from other works, or a new way of showing something. I get really excited when I see something where I think, wow, I've never seen this before. However, it is not enough to simply be different. It's necessary to have a sense of realism that makes you think that the world really exists. Fujimoto-sensei's work has a magnificent scale to the whole story, and the development will change from one to another, but in the end, it will result in concrete, familiar emotions. I feel closer to Denji from Chainsaw Man, especially his masochist tendencies, which translate in his submission to insane female characters like Makima. Denji is an unconventional, unorthodox, and almost irreverent character, one knowing no limits to his actions and words. Scandalous, hard to be labeled, only solidifying Chainsaw Man as genre-breaking which in classic battle shonen would see him spike at a crazy power level once reached the conclusion of the story compared to its beginning. That here instead has the superhero get considerably weaker in terms of power. But it's really not this one the focus in Chainsaw Man. And Fujimoto must be grinning thinking of all those he tricked with his Gun Devil trap. All the construction of Chainsaw Man's story is an illusion, something the author isn't new to, and falling for it each time is magical. According to you, why did the content of shonen magazines get softer after the 80s? I would expand that observation to animation, to all of pop culture even. We scratched spaces of artistic expressions, bit by bit, and creators, hitting a wall, decided themselves to fix limits. It is a form of very pernicious self-censorship to which we refuse to affiliate with Chainsaw Man. Experiencing Chainsaw Man is like reading a movie, thanks to not only all the references, but also because of its cinema-like attitude and role. I've always wanted to write a manga that's like a Korean movie. A lot of people say that in Korean movies they can't tell what the director is thinking, but actually, if you watch until the end, you'll get it. I wanted to make something like that. I think my readers have read a lot of manga and gotten bored. That sounds about right. People have gotten tired of orthodox manga. You have to stray from the path if you want to go anywhere. The playful but innovative tone of the manga is immediately announced in the first page, as Denji says he sold one of his nuts to pay his debt, while hunting out of all the imaginable and frightening devils in the universe to hook the reader, a tomato devil. Overall, the first chapter is the manifesto, listing the intentions of Fujimoto and his style. In fact, to take the spotlight is the raw contrast between this comicality and Denji's poverty and ignorance, both internal and external. So many times throughout this story will he say, "I've heard that," because he has not experienced anything in person. He's only heard things from other people, and so that devils heal from drinking blood, or that they can take over dead people's bodies. He knows this because he has happened to pick it up from conversations in his surroundings. Unable to sleep because of the hunger, and tormented awake at night, with all the thoughts only furthering his inability to sleep. Not even given the time to dream. Denji is all but human. From the Yakuza to the time with the public safety, Fujimoto occasionally snaps the reader back to a harsh reality, where Denji's simple dream of normality clashes with his inability to understand true freedom. Little details here and there, like his illiteracy, preventing him from fully understanding the menu at a restaurant, achieve, along with the art style, looking like a rough draft, gritty, approximate and dark, a sense of realism for this story. The sad and poor realism of the less fortunate, desiring just a slice of bread with some jam on top, a bath and a bed. If the aesthetics give Chainsaw Man a down-to-earth look, on the other hand, it also adds to the experience of reading considerably. The nervous, hasty, feverish lines make the art breathe, alive, and easier to digest while starving the reader for more because of this blood rush overflowing the pages. So, not only are the images and their concepts simpler to convey, as substance prevails over form beautifully, but even more spotlight receives the love for cinematography, thanks to the way the smooth paneling narrates the story as if playing a film reel. Thanks to the countless references, to the role of cinema and to another two elements: the breaking of the fourth wall and surrealism coupled with absurdity. Several times the fourth wall is broken by Fujimoto, from Power telling the audience first and Denji with Himeno second about her idea to win the Nobel Prize, to the Gun Devil only sparing those born in October during its attack, which happens to be the author's month of birth, conveniently. But the most intelligent and emblematic use of the breaking of the fourth wall in Chainsaw Man has to be in chapter 64, where the torn-off arms of the characters replace the paneling and illustrate the frightening encounter in hell with the Darkness Devil, who a few pages later travels through dimensions as shown by its arm literally entering the panel with ease. Though the greatest example has to do with the choice of naming the manga itself Chainsaw Man, and selecting specifically the chainsaws as the strongest devil, as will be explained later. Hell is where Fujimoto's genius blooms. According to many valid interpretations, many are the meanings hidden in the arrival of the Darkness Devil, as the road for it is made by buried astronauts cut in half, as a frog croaks, as its body is the union of many. I'd like to offer my own interpretation here, which may likely be as wrong as daring. You know, I don't grant too much importance to this symbolism. A name is a name, as an example. If I choose to give a biblical name to a character, that doesn't mean he will end up like in the texts. Surrealism is a key to reading Chainsaw Man, especially its hell representation, as suggested by the reference to the 1929 short film Ancien Andalou by Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dalí. In particular, there is the iconic scene of a woman's eye cut with a razor, just as the surrealist cinema's intention is to tear the viewer's eye apart and show them, even if at the cost of suffering, something they have never seen before, and maybe even what they have not been wanting to see. Hell is a feverish experience dictated by dream logic, where there is meaning only where meaning is given. The film has the objective to have a moral impact on the viewers through the aggressiveness of the images, offensive at the time. It is a climate of absurdity, dreamlikeness, oddities, creativity that the surrealists used to highlight the elusiveness of existence and therefore its intrinsic wonderfulness. And so, the six-fingered hand with ants traversing it, the sky made of infinite and closed doors, the seemingly peaceful vibe of the grassy land with a bathtub resting on it, the very fleshy arrival of the Darkness Devil. All of this only makes sense if interpreted without rationality. Instead, by listening to Buñuel's own comment on his short film, which accepts as the only form of analysis applicable the psychoanalysis, as Ancien Andalou was based on his and Salvador Dalí's dreams. So it's likely hell, as portrayed in Chainsaw Man, is simply the result of Fujimoto's dreams, and in fact, purpose of surrealism is to express the real functioning of thought, the command of thought, in the absence of any control exercised by reason, outside of all aesthetic and moral concern. In short, hell is a pure psychic automatism, unbridled, in which the subconscious takes over when awake. What I learned from the city of Nikaho in Akita Prefecture is that it is okay for the boundaries to be vague. That way, I think, we can always be interested in new things. Thanks to the fact that countless unnamed devils in hell stare at the characters without showing themselves, but slowly getting nearer and nearer, the devils of the primal fears who have never died, knowing there is no way back out. Imagination here is allowed to play by its own rules and feed the reader with horror, drawing the next scene based on their subconscious and conscious together. This blurred boundary between exposition and imagination is yet another narrative technique by Fujimoto that will come back around in at least another 2 occasions in this story. Absurd is another fit adjective to use when describing Chainsaw Man. Something is absurd when there is a lack of common sense between a premise and conclusion, in a humorous way. For example, it would be absurd to say that the Chainsaw Devil is the most feared of all devils. And yet it is. Exactly why even the chainsaws? Are they that feared by humans to justify the power to erase names from existence? Why not other devils that have been frightening humanity for millions of years? It is all too absurd and at the same time breaking the fourth wall. Absurdity comes in handy to Fujimoto as a comedic device to explain the reality of a situation. It is absurd and yet sad that Denji accepts Makima's offer to join her after being found by her, simply because of a good breakfast plan. It is absurd and yet so powerful that Denji eats Himeno's vomit after being kissed by her, but it furthers his characterization as he has been used to not wasting any food. Other times, absurdity is only meant to make the audience smile, and so it is absurd that a tomato devil exists, or that a devil would spare Denji because he is cute, or again, that among all the mess after a fight, some attention is dedicated, respectfully, to a cat, enough that it is pointed out that it's being checked on by a vet. The sudden change of mood from serious to playful creates an unreal atmosphere where anything could happen, and it generates with its dramatic unpredictability, as defined by Fujimoto himself, opposite feelings in the audience, while not resulting jarring, like the Kobeni car and hamburger incidents. A tendency for absurdism can be found in your work. Yes, except that I'm not trying to abruptly change the turn of my story, or break the rhythm by injecting humor. My change of tone comes first and foremost through the intervention of a disruptive character. What does humor bring to your story? It allows me to destabilize the point of view that the reader initially has on my story. My reference in the matter is the Korean film The Wailing, in which the viewer ends up not knowing by which hand he should follow this scenario because of how much the director throws red herrings and cover trucks. I tried to attain the same effect. Other times, something is so absurd that it makes sense. In short, Fujimoto has managed to convert the audience to his way of thinking, like Denji eating Makima to defeat her, or even choosing the Chainsaw Devil as the strongest. Why? Well, because as stated in the very first page, the author loves chainsaws. A design with solid essence is more appealing than all the detail. No matter how weird the design is, if it doesn't have a sense of novelty in its essence, it doesn't mean anything. Specifically, I think it's amazing that the violent and messy essence of the characters in Chainsaw Man can immediately be perceived from the design. In terms of character personality, the characters drawn by Fujimoto-sensei, like Togata from Fire Punch, already include the gag element at the center of his persona. Therefore, you can create a situation where a serious act carried out by a character is perceived as a complete joke to others. Furthermore, I feel that the core of Fujimoto-sensei's work is the structure where the gag element of a character is the driving force of the story. Fujimoto-sensei would simply draw out his favorite things just as it is. To be specific, I felt that the "just stick the chainsaw onto him" type design of the Chainsaw Man that Denji transforms into is done on purpose. I think Fujimoto-sensei didn't want to design it in a way where the chainsaws integrated into his body more naturally. I think all of these bold moves of putting things in just as they are is something that Fujimoto-sensei consciously does. Love as fulcrum of life, dreams and madness as means to overcome rationality, and finally, liberation of the individual from all social conventions. These surrealist and absurd principles only make more sense now when speaking of Chainsaw Man. And just about speaking, the dialogue is to be pointed out. I try to make the conversations in the manga as realistic as possible. By realistic, I don't mean the content of the dialogue, but the nuances of the frame layout and speech. Unlike people in movies, people in real life stumble in their conversations and repeat the same words over and over again. I would like to bring that out as much as possible without losing the tempo of the conversation. The dialogue in Chainsaw Man is another strong characteristic, and the one used is often a colloquial language, informal enough to be defined disparaging at times, not afraid to use terms not usually seen in literature, while very common in the everyday life. The purpose of such dialogue differs depending on the intentions Fujimoto has in mind. And so, for instance, the zombie devil talking like an idiot and announcing the reasons out loud to Denji on why he hates the devil hunters, or how the Yakuza were unwise enough to make a pact with him, it's just for comedy, like the Kobani noises. Other times, the dialogue is a form of realism. Fujimoto has a way of writing with nonchalance, as if he's not even trying, despite the result being exceptional. So, Denji addressing power as Poop Devil, while cleaning a not-so-hygienic bathroom after being used by her, is a glimpse at the everyday life in House Hayakawa, and the stress power causes. Or, it's sunny. Feels like I just took a nice dump. Maybe says something about Fujimoto and his passion for human excrements. But there is one more. So Denji, you like Makima too? I super do. Would you like her, even if her personality was crap? I like crap. Besides growing concerns on the author's relationship with Poop, these lines of dialogue tell Denji's feelings very clearly and characterize him exemplarily. No matter how weird it gets, the protagonist is one driven by an irrational sexual attraction and ignorant naivety, as also shown once encountered Reize. I like people who like me. Help me, Makima. I'm gonna fall for this chick. But most importantly, there is a silent and implicit narrative happening along the main and explicit one, only at times surfacing. The Gun Devil is a plot device to push this story onward, and for two reasons. First of all, it's the core of Makima's plan to manipulate and eventually control Denji. But the Gun Devil is also part of Fujimoto's plan to mock the reader. In classic battle shonen, the main character has to overcome several obstacles and power up in order to defeat the final boss and achieve a happy ending. But in Chainsaw Man, none of this happens. So I thought that if I was going to do a heroic story, I had to rethink the structure of the story. I don't know if I was able to do that successfully in the manga, but I think hero stories are only the surface of the skin. So I hope to pursue the theme more. The so-called hero is a person who has flaws and is very sad. In the end, Denji became a hero who protected mankind from devils and was praised by the world. He became a necessary and loved existence. Although Denji is only naively happy about it, the horror of being worshipped as an idol is also depicted in Fire Punch. People who are regarded as heroes have a stronger impression of being forced to be than becoming a hero. However, I think they are people who lack something. So, compared to Marvel comics, the heroes in DC comics are more realistic to me, and I like them very much. Carrying sadness, there are many characters portrayed as criminals. Moreover, the power to save others is inherently heterogeneous, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot live normally. The hero will stand up and continue fighting no matter how many times. Is this really such a beautiful thing? Unable to give up as a hero, as a chainsaw man, Denji acted in order to defeat Makima at the end of the first part. It can only be done by people with flaws, but it is also a depressing and loving behavior. Denji's feelings for Makima were one way only. Although he didn't expect such a conclusion, he had to put an end to the incommunicable relationship. I always thought about it. I finally did it. The most correct way to end a hero story. I think the hero should give up being a hero. And since Denji is unlikely to give up, I can only start the second part. So I use Denji, danger. But powerful and terrifying things feel like they have some dullness in them. Although I have the main line of the story I want to describe and the theme of the story I want to convey them incompletely in the comics. Besides Denji's animalistic nature, which already sets him apart from any other character in his role, the obstacles to overcome during the hurry the story is in hold a significant different meaning for this tragic anti-hero, giving a glimpse at Fujimoto's silent narrative, which happens to be the real one. Sneakily, in chapter 13, where the Gun Devil is introduced as the main villain, in a bookshelf, a few volumes of Fire Punch can be spotted. A story where, exactly like here, there is an illusory plot hiding the real one. And just a page later, the tale of the country mouse and the city mouse is narrated, which is in fact the reveal of the true plot. Denji ending up weaker than ever at the end, both physically and emotionally, with the final boss and puppeteer defeated. All these elements show how Chainsaw Man is truly not linear, not about defeating this or that devil and be victorious. Chainsaw Man's true focus is on the background of all these events, on Denji's quest about finding his heart. thinks he's already crossed the finish line to his dream once obtained thanks to Makima: a good breakfast, a comfortable bed to sleep in, and a bath to use at will. Basically, normality. But it's a feeling that will repeatedly present itself, the one that something is missing. Denji is a character that, for his ignorance, is unable to have a critical judgment on what his eyes see, on what his ears hear, on what his hands touch. Treated like a dog and behaving like a dog, with a dog as heart, passed from owner to owner. He knows no freedom, and even if he were given it, he would not know how to use it. To manipulate somebody, the best strategy is to keep them in ignorance and control them with fear or seduction. During his time in the Yakuza, Denji was kept on a leash with the terror of having to repay his father's debt. And even if happy with Pochita, he still wanted to be happier and dreamt of a better life, because dreaming is indeed part of being human. How could a dog say no to Makima's offer after being rescued by her? The thing with Makima is that she immediately establishes the kind of relationship she would like to have with Denji by using the specific vocabulary of addressing him as a pet and feeding his animalistic side with encouraging rewards and compliments. Denji inevitably falls in love with her for being the first person to ever treat him with kindness. Even if on her terms, this life is a dream come true. The transition to humanity for Denji would only start with joining House Hayakawa, with Aki eventually becoming an older brother and Power a little sister. Despite their initial glaring differences, a feeling of affection soon blooms, and future episodes, along with their everyday life, would only help the birth of this family. Family as the culmination of the embrace, the bonding with other humans, which Denji, being uneducated, cannot understand and oversimplifies childishly to an elementary sexual want toward Makima, when instead it is a much deeper need, something even Aki and Power are in search for, with their own peculiarities. It's only when lost that such a thing would be missed. The everyday life, the mess at breakfast, the hanging clothes to dry, maybe some blood left on the floor after a fight between Denji and Power, the TV, playing some movie and the three of them watching it on the couch. Much is left intentionally to the imagination, and it's the beauty of it, of those days spent together. Power and Denji are more similar than they may look. The Bat Devil incident shows Power's need of having something or somebody by her side, which happened to be a cat, Meowie, a life spared so that she could fatten it and enjoy eating later. But something about Meowie was different. To hear a voice that wasn't a scream, on top of its blood, of which Power loves the smell, the taste, the feeling of death, but it had more to it. Warmth. Upon learning the truth about the Bat Devil capturing Meowie and taking it away from Power, Denji, able to relate, wonders, how did she feel when she went to sleep at night? Empathy, a human quality, is here represented by both the characters still unable to realize their unconscious and instinctive search of love. As the Bat Devil eats and seemingly kills Meowie, Power says, "You said you can't pet Pochita anymore. I know how you feel." It's a horrible sensation. And, as if dead herself, she lets the butt devil eat her too, because she has just lost family. Denji begins from this episode here to seriously doubt his dream. Many are the affinities. The way Power used to hug Miaue is the exact same as Denji and Pochita. The need of contact, something that isn't touching a woman's chest or kissing, is missing. Power running to save Miaue, for its blood or so she kept telling herself. Same as Denji wanting to cope a feeling. They are not even excuses to justify their ways. It's their ignorance that masks their need of affection under a different cover, which is proved in Denji's case by finally having his hands on his dream and only realizing it wasn't as expected, because deep inside, it was not what he needed. As if he was happier while chasing the dream. But time and time again, like later on with the cola-flavored lollipop, Makima seizes the opportunities presenting themselves to strengthen her control over Denji, with her eyes growing even more hypnotizing and charismatic, exploiting this one weakness of him, the fact that Denji is only now living and experiencing his first times. The event destined to grow Aki and Denji's bond would be Himeno's death, and especially the requiem performed by them for her. The scene is silent as the images speak alone, only letting go a scream at the very end. But to reach such a point and see Aki more loosened up, behaving surprisingly like Denji and enjoying the moment, he would need 2 words: easy revenge. A few years back, Himeno had tried to get Aki into smoking, which she eventually succeeded at, but at the time, he was not an adult yet, and so she had kept that one cigarette for such an occasion. When you're adult and you need something to loosen up, I'll get it back to you. Aki is your typical battle shonen protagonist with a tragic past and the need to gain more strength, like the future devil power-up later on, to pursue his goal of defeating the main villain, the gun devil. And so, he would need such a reminder, the cigarette, to reignite his ambition and keep moving forward. Smoking is one way to numb the pain and cloud the mind from the thought of the approaching and inevitable death that comes with being a devil hunter, and normally someone would grow accustomed to it, apathetic. But Aki, no matter what, he has always been quick to cry on a friend's death. So, having someone care enough to cry for you must make a person happy. Don't you die, Aki, 'cause when I die, I want you to cry. Despite smoking being a theme suggesting a nihilistic view of life, marked by pessimism and a sentiment of despair, where no human action can truly impact the events of the world, where smoking symbolizes detachment from feelings, emblematic that Aki could not light his cigarette when in the hospital bed right after Himeno's death. Here, Aki finds the opposite and needed strength from it, as a helping hand from his senpai Himeno. From here, Aki quits smoking. In fact, he's shown throwing his pack of cigarettes into a trash can, because he doesn't need it anymore to take the edge off. He has started to value his feelings outside of his revenge motive again. Feelings for his partners, with whom he's sharing his everyday life, and they are themselves the replacement to smoking. This everyday life is what changes Aki, especially one adverb makes the difference. Makima asks if he is getting along with Power, to which he replies, "We got into a fist fight again this morning." The adverb again means that it is not the first time it happens, and so it adds another layer to the multitude of incidents happening in House Hayakawa each day. It adds a flavor of daily to life. The pranks, the food, all the headaches Power and Denji cause him. Aki would miss all of this if it were over. But this thought has not yet matured completely in his mind. Some time would still be needed for him to lose courage in front of death. While developing the Hayakawa family, the Easy Revenge episode would also put even more the very existence of Denji's heart in doubt, as here he admits he would not be able to cry for anyone's death because, after all, 3 meals a day, sleeping well, and a hot bath are the best for his life. Something is still missing. I've got nothing. Another chess piece moves for Denji's advancement on his quest to find his own heart, and that is Reze. How cinematographic is their encounter, with the rain forcing first Denji, Reze second, to take shelter in a phone box, with Reze not showing her face yet, while laughing at Denji's for resembling her dead dog, and then with Denji vomiting a flower he'd just eaten and gifting it to her, finally stunning him with her beauty. And the rain stops. They agree on a rendezvous, and Reze walks away through some streets. Denji is a kid, only now discovering the world and learning about life. He's so simple that I like people who like me, and falls for Reze in a day. Despite being more the body moving on its own than the heart suggesting his actions, Denji's attraction for Reze is genuine. Born fake, their love grew true. Reze taught Denji many things, from reading to what school is like, to swimming, and to fighting smartly. Denji came out of this intermission smarter, more knowledgeable, and sensitive. Even if the blushing and flirting were all part of her plan to seduce him, Reze's offer to run away together was indeed true, but Denji could not go with her yet, as he had just started growing closer to Aki and Power. Even if everything was a play, at the core, everything was genuine. Going to school, far away, together. That would have been a dream. Reze and Denji literally put themselves naked in front of each other. The love for Reze is a different feeling than with Makima. If the latter is a rudimental sexual attraction, the former was rich of experiences and discoveries. It was warmer. They wake up at the seashore, after fighting for an entire night. Reze reminds Denji that nothing of what she said or did to him was true, but to that he responds, "Wanna run away with me? Because you say it was all a lie, but isn't it true that you taught me how to swim?" To which she blushes. One narrative is introduced through Reze by Fujimoto, and it's the tale of the country mouse and city mouse. If the country one lives safely, away from danger, on the other hand, it cannot eat as well as the city mouse that instead risks its life every day. Denji is a city mouse, while Reze the other, and as she steps out of her way to walk through those familiar city streets to meet Denji at the usual cafe, she gets caught. As she's dying, a few meters away in the cafe is Denji, with a backpack and flowers waiting for her. The door for a new life, and it's unsure if she sees him. Well, Denji will never know if she was coming. She wonders why she did not kill Denji when she could have. And then she remembers she never went to school either. Denji waits until night for her and eventually eats the flowers as a way to reset the past weeks, as if going back in time and forgetting, pretending this never happened, pretending he never gave her that one flower. A corollary of the country and city mouse is perhaps Quanxi's way of thinking, according to which ignorance is bliss. The secret to living happy is to stay ignorant, to avoid knowledge because the truth hurts. Remaining in the dark, keeping that door closed are what assure happiness, an ignorant one, but unsusceptible to pain. Emblematic that with Makima killing his lifetime crush and ex-partner Quanxi in front of him, Kishibe decides to stay blindfolded and says, "I don't wanna see a thing." Despite having heard clearly the sound of the sword dropping, the sound of death, and having felt her blood splash onto his face. The Hayakawa family is slowly coming together. If the trip to hell had any consequence on Aki, it would be him losing courage in front of death, but in a good way, as, tired of seeing those around him die helplessly, he would try to live the rest of his days in peace with Power and Denji, finally understanding his new feelings, but in vain. After all, everybody's playing into Makima's hands. Power is at her worst, in a most vulnerable state after confronting the Darkness Devil. Denji, like an older brother, takes care of feeding her. He even sleeps beside her. It's all very sweet, intimate, tender, and yet not sexually suggestive. It's a pure friendship, a weird but genuine one. Denji spends all his days physically attached to Power because she needs him and he is there for her. Aki asks Denji why he declined going on a trip alone with Makima, and he replies, "Why didn't I? I don't know." And yet, outside are hanging clothes left to dry. In the kitchen, some dishes to wash, and in the living room, a TV show to watch all together. Only bits of their everyday life have been shown, and for some aspects, it's better to just imagine it. As monotone as it may have been sometimes, it must have been fun too. To keep most of it off-screen, to let the imagination wander, is poetic. There are some things that you have to know, and some things it's best to stay in the dark about. And this is the type of days that heal Power's scars. But not just hers, so much so that something would happen on their trip to Hokkaido, Aki's home. The snow falls faintly outside the window. Both Aki and Denji lose themselves in that empty and white view. Nothing to be seen. Only places where the imagination can run wild and paint the environment. All the years Aki had gone back home, he would be depressed, as only ill thoughts would plague his mind. But with Denji and Power being two animals, he didn't even have time to think. "You're welcome?" Behind A calendar, as if time was running out, the curtains closing. Somebody is behind the door. A familiar smell. Somebody it's better to stay in the dark about. They had been waiting for him to return. Aki's death is emotionally oppressive to witness, despite and because the reader has been told since the start, time and time again, that not much time was left. There was no ignorance. That door was half open since the beginning, and opening it up, having the visual confirmation of the inevitable and tragic end of Aki is what does it. Fewer will be the shoes at the entryway, the shirts and towels to fold, and the dishes, the chopsticks in the sink, all quieter, all over. Just to live something like another mere year with power and Denji, Aki was willing to trade his 20 or so years of revenge and hate for devils, as also seen with him befriending Angel. He lost courage, the courage to see the people of his everyday life dead. It seems his crews were not that close anymore, as if gone back into place. And so, in a snowball fight the tragedy, in the past, but in an alternate universe, where Aki is still waiting for his young brother Taiyo, playing with Denji and power in the meantime. For each snowball, a hail of bullets, until I've never seen you cry before. Denji will never know if he could have saved Aki. He refuses to believe what opening that door offered him. The guy who had wanted to defeat the gun devil had it cost him his life, and yet he ended up becoming one with it. For each snowball, a smile, a glimpse at a life that could have been. Taiyo arrives. Reality strikes him. Oh, yeah, I wanted to play catch. Aki is dead. Once Denji would have eaten his own vomit, but not now with Aki gone and, most importantly, murdered by him. Annihilated, dehumanized, Makima reaches her goal of neutralizing Denji, who out of all wishes desires to become her dog. The many dogs at Makima's place look happy. This is the best place in the world. These dogs look stupidly happy, cherishing their ignorance, leaving choices and responsibilities to their owner, preferring to stay in the dark and depending on someone else. Denji's tears are swiftly licked away by them, as if wanting to preserve such an atmosphere and inviting Denji to join them. Yet again, it's Makima encouraging Denji to open the door without hiding, instead by declaring her intention of killing Power. Just like with Aki, the reader knows what lies behind the door, and because it is known, it hurts even more. The following silence, the brightness and tidiness of the room, as opposed to the painting in the background by Gustave Doré, all creates a surreal atmosphere where time is frozen, thoughts unorganized, and the revealed future inevitable and darker. Denji had found his heart without even knowing it. The family he'd been living in, making that level of normality his new happiness, as supported and destroyed by the necessary evil of Makima, who, through the reveal of a dark truth, entirely exhausts Denji's humanity. Makima has never matured out of her dream of controlling Chainsaw Man to create her ideal world, but her adoration is so laughably childish that, once won against Chainsaw Man, she's seen smoke a cigarette for the first time and cough, meaning she was happier in the chase of her dream rather than at the moment of obtaining it. Like Denji, with many things. So desperately caught up in her ideal of Chainsaw Man, here portrayed emblematically as a Kamen Rider, Makima plays herself and loses to not Chainsaw Man, but to Denji, beaten back by her own dog, and especially with Denji exploiting her sense of smell, the one thing she shared with dogs, ironically. But there are another two moments worth mentioning to complete Denji's incredible character development, and these are Power's sacrifice and Kobani's comment. In a dumpster, like where everything began with Pochita, Power revives thanks to the blood left in Denji's body from the time she had let him drink it. At his weakest, now Power is there for Denji. For her first friend, she hugs him and pays Denji back by not simply saving his life with her blood, but by giving it a new purpose, rekindling his heart, reminding him of his family, of normality. Denji was happy in his ignorance, but paradoxically, it was this very ignorance that brought ruin to his happiness. Denji's never decided anything in life, always leaving decisions up to others and letting them exploit him, like a dog. In an exchange with Kobani, she replies that a life with no bad things exists only in dreams. And this shocks Denji, since it's impossible to have a dream-like life. Life can only come close to dreams, but never be the same. And Kobani surely knows this. It's true. Denji's been living in a dream, which turned into a nightmare. It's time to wake up and live real life. The normal life, where both good and bad things coexist inevitably. There can't be only good things. But I want it to be normal. This is what being normal is. Normality does not equate happiness. Sadness is also on the menu. Life is not the dream Denji thought. This conversation comes back around when facing Makima in the last battle, where Denji asks her if in her new and ideal world there will be bad movies, to which she replies negatively, and that is the deal breaker for Denji, which ties back to their cinema date, back when they had to watch many mediocre movies to finally find a good one. And incidentally, it was on the scene where the two characters hug that both Makima and Denji cried, as that is what they had been searching for unknowingly. Life is a movie marathon with lots of bad movies, but then you find one great enough to change your life, making all the marathon worth it. The idea of Denji could not be conveyed to Makima. There are good feelings, but for her, power needs to be used to achieve her purpose. Isn't a chainsaw just a tool? Therefore, Chainsaw Man is based on the theme of use and be utilized. Because of this, Makima's ability is related to dominance, control. As the enemy of the devil hunters, the gun devil was created, and it is easy to understand that everybody's afraid of it. But other than that, for people nowadays, being controlled, dominated, is also a terrible thing. The first part tells the story until Denji becomes a complete person, a process of liberation from the shackles of unconscious family memories. At this point, there is also liberation from being unwittingly used by Makima. Denji also lived a similar life when he lived with Pochita. Although there is pain, it is not unfortunate. Denji fell in love at first sight with Makima, who was gentle and embraced him at first sight. That is the absolute love for the person who gives him destiny, purpose, which will not change even after he knows that her attempt is to hurt him. It is the love for his parents rather than love. In fact, by cutting the tree in Makima's name with a chainsaw, it becomes Mama. At the end, Denji still loved his owner, so much that he became one with her as proof of love. One, pure and innocent, irrational. The ending is particularly important as Nayuta, the reincarnation of the control devil, now in Denji's care, wants to eat sliced bread, just what Denji used to have back in the shed with Pochita, symbolizing how there can be happiness at whatever level of normality, at whatever distance from a dream, as long as there are hugs, love, family, heart,